Meanwhile, Inkosi Zwelakhe Ndaba of the Ndaba clan under the Mhlungwini Traditional Council in Ndaba Mhlophe near Escort in KwaZulu-Natal Midlands has been shot and killed. KwaZulu-Natal police spokesperson Robert Njunda says that the local Inkosi was shot at his homestead yesterday evening. Njunda says that the chief was asleep when two men entered his home. One man then went into the bedroom and fired several shots, while the other held his wife at gunpoint. After the shooting, both men jumped over the fence and fled the scene. No other person was reported injured during this incident, and the motive of the shooting is unknown at this stage. We'll certainly keep you updated as the story is a developing story. We're going to stay in KZN. The government there is calling on residents to remain indoors and be extra vigilant on the roads as heavy rains batter northern parts of the province. For more on this, let's bring in Gugu Sisilana, who is a media liaison officer in the office of the KwaZulu-Natal Premier Nomusa Dube-Ncube. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us here on SABC News.
Good afternoon to you and the viewers at home.
Let me start by asking you, before we get to the issue of the province and the rains, has the Premier, given that the incident did happen in KZN, has the Premier at any point made any comments with regards to the murder, the killing of popular rapper AKA?
Yes, indeed. The Premier would like to express her sincere condolences to the families of Kiernan Forbes, known as AKA, and another victim who were brutally shot and killed in Durban last night. The Premier has obviously asked the law enforcement authorities to work around the clock in ensuring that those responsible for this heinous murder are brought to book. The Premier has further called on those that with information on what happened and the community at large, to work closely with the police in ensuring that KZN, is not known as a murder capital, but that we continue to attract tourists and investors into our province. The Premier further calls on all those that have information and all those that might have seen what transpired last night to come forward, because the criminals that live in our communities, our families, are our brothers, are our fathers, and therefore they need to be brought to book.
All right. Let's then talk about what our conversation is really about, and that is the heavy rains expected in the province. Of course, KZN has really been, one could say, the victim of these heavy rains and floods that have happened. Which parts of the province are most affected by these rains and expected flooding, where people should really be vigilant in those parts? Where are you giving those particular warnings?
Indeed, Flo, our province has been issuing weather warnings since Wednesday this week, whereby we've been calling on residents in northern parts of KwaZulu-Natal, mainly in the Umkhanyakude district, in Amajube district, and also in Umzinyati district, to be extra vigilant and to remain indoors and only go out when it's absolutely necessary. I mean, our province, in recent months has been prone to floods, and we often find that, people tend to ignore the evacuation notices, but we appeal on our residents to ensure that they listen to law enforcement authorities and our disaster management teams to ensure that they are safe during this period. Yeah. So far in Umkhanyakude districts, whereby the Umtai Marula Festival, which normally takes place in Umtai Infantry Royal Palace, that has had to be called off because of the extreme weather conditions. Umtai normally attracts tourists from Swaziland, Mozambique, and our law enforcement authorities and our road traffic management teams have closed off roads leading to those parts of the province to ensure that there's safety on the roads. In Newcastle, we received reports of evacuation from our COCTA and disaster management teams, and people are being accommodated in various community halls and state buildings in that area.
Yeah, you're talking about giving people evacuation notices, and in in many instances people have no, other accommodation or anywhere else to go. So what measures, does the province really put in place when you're giving people these notices that they should evacuate, where they live or where they reside? Where should they go when they're given these sort of evacuation notices? And perhaps this is why people just end up, ignoring them because, what other alternative do they have?
I mean, we work closely with our councillors in the wards, where the communities are mostly affected. Yeah. And I mean, our first port of call is to advise residents to go to their nearest, community service centre or the community halls, whereby we know that our first responders, are there to ensure that there's blankets and that at least they have a warm meal, while we try and look for alternative accommodation for them. And we do appeal on residents, to really heed these calls, and when there are weather warnings, our councillors and our ward councillors and our mayors are on the ground to ensure that our communities, are safe. And we do also understand, as you rightly said, that, people, don't want to leave their belongings at home because they're not sure of safety. However, we appeal to them to be on also high-lying ground, because we often find that low-lying areas are normally, worst affected during these flood incidents. So we do appeal, to our residents to just ensure that they listen to authorities and follow all the instructions for their safety, because we don't want to lose any more lives as we did in April and May last year.
Yeah, and I mean, it's difficult to obviously anticipate as to, when things will clear up and when this weather condition is expected to last. But maybe then one should ask how long you have these particular sort of contingency measures put in place for the people who may be affected by this adverse weather.
The plans are put in place for as long as the rains, continue to persist in our province. I mean, we have our disaster management teams that have been on the ground, assessing the situation and collating reports. We also have our road traffic inspectorates, who've been closing off the roads to ensure that motorists, do not drive beyond a certain point, to also prevent further loss of lives. But we do appeal, to motorists especially to adhere, the rules of the road, and to also ensure that they find a safe place to park and not, drive under heavy conditions where the visibility is very poor. Because often you find that, you deal with another disaster and then you also deal with a man-made disaster whereby, people insist on driving under, inclement weather conditions when they can see that, it is very poor or bad to drive in those conditions. So we do also call on motorists, to only go to, go out when they absolutely need to do so, and not drive around, adhering to the fact that, we have these severe weather conditions and we can't afford to be dealing with another disaster whereby, people's lives are lost on our roads, due to, bad driving and poor visibility as well because of the poor weather conditions.
All right, Gugu, many thanks to you for speaking to us then this afternoon. Gugu Sisilana is Media Liaison Officer in the office of the KZN Premier.